today, Rinpoche gave us a very clear understanding of how our words, when imbued with negativity, become very consequential in terms of our future rebirths. Gosh. Nga yure.
Okay.
The hula, tuchina.
Yeah. Namurasan.
The ngamo ramasan, the yure. Ye shime, ye tomasan. Let's go. Here, just put it right there. It's fine. Just thank you. Tuchina Rinpoche.
Oh, yeah. Photo the tissue.
Does everybody have? Yeah. Could you bring Priscilla a piece in the back? I don't think that she got one. Anyone else who would like a piece of the sweet torma that Rinpoche makes is welcome to it if you haven't gotten it. It's just honey, barley, flour, and butter. And lots of prayers.
Oh, yeah. That's the thing I took about to do.
Sunja. Koyari.
Nabi Chuji. Nabi Chuji, Dambula, Nibala, Sombala Juiba.
Less, okay.
Sombala Ju the Lari Chenmo. Sonja Sonju Song go there. Tiba Chenmo Sitima. Yondua. Sonja Sonju Song. Regina would then go to Tiba Chenmo Lions.
Okay. Sunju Sasum or Ni?
Sonju Sasum.
Okay.
Tambu Tiba Chenmo says, Marva.
Okay, then Pui Kabiare?
Ah,
Pui
Sonja Sasum go to the Tiba Chenmo Lion, Dabar Shubis.
Tiba Chemba Young Dabra. Okay, Ross. Okay, so
What
we're going to begin right at page 77 in the English. So just as a brief introduction, translator's note, welcome to the Chenrezig Tibetan Buddhist Center. We are currently studying Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and specifically the section on training the mind in the stage of the path for beings of great capacity. That text is a 3-volume series that's been translated into English. We're currently in the 2nd volume, and specifically the section under training the mind in the stage of the path for beings of great capacity, or the great vehicle section. We're under the part where we learn about the spirit of enlightenment, or bodhicitta, the bodhisattva vows, or the spirit of enlightenment vows, and how we keep them in this lifetime and not let them weaken, and then how we do so in the next lifetime. So this is the section that we're in, just as a frame of reference for anyone who's new. There may or may not, are there any more volume 2s up here? Does anyone know? It's impossible for me just to hop up with all this in my ankle, but if you need a volume 2, I believe there are some more up in this cabinet. Thank you, Coleman, or anybody who can just grab one. Just for anyone who doesn't have one in the room, it's just great to have one to follow along. Okay. The Gonga Mepichi Rinpoche, the Sarpa Kashi.
Oh, yeah,
they are. So we'll move on. I apologize to Rinpoche, explain what I did, and he said it's very good that you did that and that everyone has a book.
Naju Dambula nga Nebala nga Sombal Juro, Sombal Juno, the Tiba Chambers over the Jugonan Tom the Leganua.
So the Ewat Sumba Jew Yure 10. Okay, 2 channels. So okay, so the Tambo dan Nipa nga nga. Okay, 2 channel. Okay, so now just where we are in the sections. Page 76 into 77 in the English go over the four dark practices, and there are these categories that we're going over. And the first two categories, there are going to be four, obviously, in relation to these four dark practices. The first two categories we've already gone over, and we found that there were 5 divisions in each of those, or 5 different points, according to Jayan Sheba's commentary, in each of those two. And now we're on point number 3, or category number 3 in Lama Tsongkhapa's text, and Jayan Sheba states that there are 10 categories under this section 3. So you see that on page 77, the marker 3. Jayan Sheba said there's 10 points, and now we're getting into the first point now. Diksung.
어제 넘부터 와야 티베 쳔벌 양다바 슈바 나라 망하바 수 파와스 티베 쳔벌 장주 셈바 수 도르레 안준주지야 뜻이고 이르와 망하바 수 파와라스 네 티베 장주 셈바 수 도르레 네 도자 로수나 디바사거로다 디바 오들레다 나비주 망아버서 마라스 유네 망아버 마사 유데 유네 초게 세지 존에 덴벌라 카지제스 네 망아버 쭈쭈제서 유데 네 샹추 센존에 덴벌라 네 카지 유데 대해서 로스 카지제 카지 하루 생제나 다다메데야 너와유데 되는도 단계 메테도스 가지지가 와데 나생 하상주 생제 사바제 다다메데나 상주생 동바인지로다 메데나야 네 대다 너와인스나 된데가 말해서 되네 도 단계는 도스 Okay,
then the Kaba, the Khensur Kaba.
See, that on the Yune, Chuge Shanju Senson, Chuge Shanju, that Shanju Sembe Domba, Chuga Lanson Land, Shanju Sembe Domba Languro, Chugas over Dangerua,
Kashi say the Yule,
Shanju Senson, Dembashila. And what the you the go to change you. Yes, what the Ranlu is at it. A Kaji jigging, ha, Saint Jena, Tata Medayans, ha, Saint Jans, the Nigeria. Medaya doesn't know you, then them don't give you potatoes, when you but take them those at Matetas, Mateto, what about Tombre?
Okay, so there's going to be 10 points. I just want to make sure that I have the break points correct. I believe that I do, but if we move forward and it looks like there's some contradiction, break points, I'll correct it and we can go from there. So speaking disparagingly, sparingly, etc., to beings who have correctly entered the Mahayana. Okay, so some say that the object is those who have the spirit of enlightenment, having adopted it through its ritual. Okay, so some say that, okay, who are we talking about when we say who are beings who have correctly entered the Mahayana? And in terms of speaking disparagingly, who are those objects that we're speaking of? Okay, so the first point is that some say it's those who have the spirit of enlightenment, having adopted it through its ritual. So those bodhisattvas are the object, according to this first point. Okay, then the Tambo Shanchu Semba, Jusemchan, Shanchu Semba, the Shanchu Sembi Dumba. Tambo. Okay, so this is the first point. We have the break point correct, I believe. Nipa?
Nipa Dereta, Nipa.
Kachi.
Debal Sebo, Janji, Otokatu, the land, the shit and Jindu. Debal Sebo Mundos. Debale says at Mare, Debale, Shanchu Semba, Sheba Zang Les, Drebale, Shanju Samba Tangle, Seka Majungons, Sebo Mundus, Shanju Samba Gade, Jingumente, Sebo Mundus, Seka Majungons, Jeremy, what the Nibare.
Okay.
Junju de la Shanju Samba, Sebo Mundus, Sebo. Shanju Samba Doja is Laurua, Doja Losa Yude, and Drebale what the Sebo Mundus.
Okay, then Rinpoche, the tambo, the kachi ngar semche na, the tambo nangla.
Then the Kajik Devatan Alu Nevanindua, Tombo the Ranlo Redua, Yune, Saint Rune,
Gonga maybe.
Dembala Kaji is what the Ranlo inside.
Less so.
Kaji Ha Saint Jena, Tata Madea, Raji to say what the Tigmaris, do don't give those, do don't give.
Okay, the tambo. Okay.
Nibat count. Tombo Nibat the Tombo the Ranlo, Tombo Nibat the Jeremy Tigmadus, do don't give those, do don't give Mateto, Nibat Tigmaris.
Then a giant sheba nipa jawane shanchu.
Janjibe Datal Deshiro, Deshi,
Okay, so the first point goes further to others say it is equally those who have previously developed the spirit of enlightenment and do not currently have it. This latter assertion contradicts the sutras and is wrong. Okay, so that will all be contained within the first point. Because it says there are those according to our system and then others. So where it says some say and then others say, the some say is the point that would be held by Lama Tsongkhapa, I believe, or Rinpoche is saying our school, so that would be Lama Tsongkhapa's school in this case, and then the others are other schools. And it says that this latter assertion contradicts the sutra and is wrong. So that is in the first point, and then Jawa Ne Shan Chu, the second point is that this commentary says simply a bodhisattva with no further clarification, even though in other scriptural texts there are many statements that those with the bodhisattva vows who are learning the trainings are the ones who have correctly entered the Mahayana. I think that here the object has to be understood as any bodhisattva, starting with those who generated the aspirational spirit of enlightenment. Okay, so we'll just see where this goes in terms of the broader outline. But, okay.
다 상주 세발 야보 말스 준제 제바 이나 안에 나비 주레스 상주 세발 도자레스 준제 제바 이나 나비 주임 주선 가린스나 디바 먹어래 요레스 먹어 인데 론데 때바 강아시 란데 남이 동에 지지리스네 바 이거들 말이야 나 주스도 어들라고 호수까지 사바 이제
So why do we say that this speaking badly or negatively to a bodhisattva is non-virtue? It's non-virtue. For those of you who are new, how do we define what non-virtue is? We define it as something that has been presented in Scripture, and is it within the lineage that necessarily gives rise to suffering, or within the lineage of those things that necessarily give rise to suffering? So this is how you determine whether something is non-virtuous or not. And in this case, we would say that the subject speaking disparagingly to a bodhisattva is non-virtue because it has been presented in Scripture. It falls categorically within those things which give rise to suffering. So that's how we would classify it as a non-virtue in the first place. And then we begin to dissect what we're speaking about when in this particular context. But speaking disparagingly is a non-virtue. So when we look at virtue or non-virtue, and then we have 10 non-virtues, 10 virtues, we would find that this would fall categorically under those non-virtuous activities when we look at them in terms of non-virtues of the speech. harsh
What the
words.
wool magangalo, what the mago, the Navasan Tangu,
And so when we think about non-virtue and what we say that is or isn't, you have to think about it in context of what qualifies it as such, makes it a non-virtue.
Ta somba Rava, somba ase, somba da Ranglu in sa Ranglu. Somba Ranglu le Senjen in Zimbas. Somba Ranglu to what there is, ta kante Shanchu Semba le, Shanchu Semba Sukura, ta Jun Jusa de la Shanchu Sen Jul Jene, the Manyaban Zin Kenji Kukures. The Shanchu Semba Tamaji Nima do Marwa. Shanchu Semba Ina, Shanchu Chu the Senjen Manyaban Zin do Yare, and the Sanji Jul to Yodrota. Sanjil Junju Jene Digdua, the Sanji Maina, Shanchu Semba Junju Jene, Shanchu Sen Zin the Majiba de Duro. What the Junjas are used than Chigures. Ranlune, Kajendo, Shanchu Sembi, Donde, Habala Hubala, Tiba Chembala Yantaba Shuba, Shubara Sheba, Mabut Hana, Senjeba Demba Ne, Zon, Guzon Yamos, Jermishi. Kakashi Letane, and Kala Shanchu Sembala, Shanchu Sembi Donden, Junjusa de la Kajendo, Shanchu Sembi Donden, Shanchu Sembi Dombata Demba, Habale Huba, Shanchu Sembi Dombata Demba, Shanchu Sembi Habale Huba. Lubala, Tijen la Yantaba Shuba la Sheba, Pasha Kashin the Sundos, Sheba, Mabun Hanas, Jermichi, Tanishesa Mamudos, Jermichi Ranlu Jenderesita, Senjebatan, Demba Nen, Zon, Kusan Yamu, Shanshu Jud, Senjeba Tenjimechi Gugres, Tania Donden in Andigros, Senjeba Zonde. Shanchu Sembi Dombata Madena, Shanchu Semba Ina, until Junju Yud Redegres. And the Shanchu Semba de la, and the Shanchu Sembi Domba Yobata Meba Niro. Shanchu Sembi Domba,
Less so.
maybe Shanchu Semba de Mersen or Mersen.
Less so.
Mersen Jula Dembe, Shanchu Semba to what Shanchu Semba Domba Dam Maro. Mersen Jula Dembe, and the Shanchu Semba Ina and Digres. And then you send you never in the kitchen Marovas, Jirmajo, the next one Jagus. Kajendo Shanju Sembi, Dondel, Habala, Hubala, Tijenla Shubala, Tijenla Yantabra Shubar, Sheba Mabut, Hanas, Tijenla Yantaba Shubatel, Pashanol, Mamushisan dos, Hanas, Senjibata Debane. Zon Gusan Yamos, Shanju to the Senjebane, and then Senjeba Solan Solan,
Salampa.
Solan, Julan, Tolan, Golan, Malula, and the Sanjeba to Garin and Digade, what the Son things that.
Less so. Okay, then this Sumba, and Nipa the Nyunyun, Rebe, the Tsik, the Jawa, Ne, Shanchu, Semba, Sheba, Sanle, the Nipa Kuna.
Debale, Junju Jessa, the Shanju Semba in the second Mundos.
Okay, the Kuna. Nipa. Okay, Tuchena. Okay, so just for further clarification on the outline, so the first category, the break point is contradicts the sutra and is wrong. The second category, the break point is only this one sentence. The commentary says simply a bodhisattva with no further clarification. So the commentary on this isn't very clear. It merely states just bodhisattva. So this is the second point, according to Jayan Sheba, that's made. The third point begins here, where I read till the end. And it is, even though in other scriptural contexts there are many statements that those with the bodhisattva vows who are learning the trainings are the ones who have correctly entered the Mahayana, I think that here the object has to be understood as any bodhisattva, starting with those who have generated the aspirational spirit of enlightenment. So here, again, this is Lama Tsongkhapa saying, according to our school, this is what we think. There are many different points that are put out there, but when we look at this term, just bodhisattvas, are found, or one becomes a bodhisattva at the path of accumulation. When we look at the 5 Mahayana paths, there's the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. A bodhisattva first generates his or her spirit of enlightenment on that path of accumulation. And the first development of the spirit of enlightenment is called aspirational spirit of enlightenment. And so when we divide spirit of enlightenment into 2 categories, we find aspirational spirit of enlightenment and engaged spirit of enlightenment. Aspirational being the spirit of enlightenment which is absent of a vow, and the engaged spirit of enlightenment and a spirit of enlightenment with the presence of a bodhisattva vow. So this is the differentiation between the two. And Lama Tsongkhapa is stating here that it's any bodhisattva on any of those grounds, on any of those paths that we say is the object that is not to be despaired in this case, because we say that at the path of accumulation where that bodhisattva first generates the spirit of enlightenment, he or she then is named a bodhisattva because of that generation, and at that point they become the object that is referenced here in this point number 3 according to Lama Tsongkhapa. So Lama Tsongkhapa is saying according to our school, our lineage, this is what we feel. We feel that you can't despair any bodhisattva because of the broadness of this category and the lack of clarification in the commentary. So here this is to be understood as any bodhisattva. It says here, starting with those who have generated the aspirational spirit of enlightenment. So we have aspiring bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta. Aspiring comes first. It happens at the path of accumulation, and at that point that being is called a bodhisattva. And at that point, according to Tsongkhapa, he or she becomes the object to not be despaired. Disong, Kangai Lasong.
다 상주 선비 동바다 대바다 상주 선발 쳐박가리요. 상주 선비 동바다 대나 상주 선바 이미 쳐마죠. 상주 선바 옛나 상주 선비 동바다 대면 대미 쳐마죠. 산다나. 뭐지 상주 선바 옛나 상주 선비 동바다 대면 마죠. 네, 몇생 줄라 이렇게 말봐.
Musum.
무슨
Yamuji. Okay.
kalesa no den san
The Shanchu, the Nigare.
상주 선바 다
Shanchu Semba.
상주 선비 동바다 대바. 상주 선비 동바다 대바다. 상주 선발을 쳐박가도
Shanchu Sembi Dumba Dandemba, the Shanchu Sembi Dumba Yuken?
No,
Okay. Gonga Mebachi. Okay. Then the Ni Chapagare.
상주 선비 동바다 대바 있나?
This is Musum.
상주 선비 동바다 대바 있나? 상주 선바 이미 쳐로.
Lesso.
상주 선바 있나? 상주 선비 동바다 마쳐.
Musum.
몇생 줄라 이렇게.
Lesso.
통랑 총어 대이로.
Lesso.
어디 무슨 소리도.
Lesso. So if we were to look at these 2 subjects and say, if we look at the bodhisattva, the 2 subjects, a bodhisattva and a holder of the bodhisattva vow, if we compare these 2, are there 3 permutations, 4 permutations, are they mutually exclusive, or are they synonymous? We find it out in this way. So if it is a bodhisattva, we'll go the other way. If it is a bodhisattva vow holder, is it necessarily a bodhisattva? So the answer is yes. Someone who holds a bodhisattva vow has to be a bodhisattva. So when we look at the next way, so that's one. We look at the next way, if it is a bodhisattva, he or she is a bodhisattva, is he or she a bodhisattva vow holder? And we say, no, it doesn't pervade it. If we say, posit that which is a bodhisattva but not a bodhisattva vow holder, we would say a bodhisattva on the path of accumulation at the smallest level. That bodhisattva is a bodhisattva because he or she has bodhicitta, but does not have a bodhisattva vow yet. So we find that that doesn't pervade it. So if someone is a bodhisattva, they do not necessarily have a bodhisattva vow. And if you say, show me someone who meets that criteria, you would say a bodhisattva on the path, the small path of accumulation. As a note, path of accumulation, the first stage of the 5 paths, has 3 levels, small, medium, and great. The smallest level is the very first beginning. That's where the aspiring bodhicitta takes place. So the argument usually in our school is that by the medium, the middle, That's where it becomes engaged no matter what. But at that small level of the path of accumulation, that being is a bodhisattva, but does not have a bodhisattva vow. So we say in this case it's 3 permutations, because we find that if it's a bodhisattva, it's not necessarily a bodhisattva vow holder, but if it's a bodhisattva vow holder, it's necessarily a bodhisattva. Then Nika Yimba, Gangisin Gegen Yomare. The Chanchu Semba dan Chanchu Sembi Dumba Yukan. Nika Yimba. Okay. Tuche. Then Nika Mayimba, Gangisin Mukanga Lago. Ribora. Okay. So then we look something which is a common locus. So then when you do this 4 permutations, 3 permutations, if it's 3 or 4, there's a common locus. If it's mutually exclusive, obviously everything is the same. But when we look at the 3 or 4, there's got to be a common locus, something which is both. So is there something which is both a bodhisattva and a bodhisattva vow holder? We'd say yes, a bodhisattva on the path of preparation, or a bodhisattva who has a bodhisattva vow, is a bodhisattva and a vow holder. And something which is neither, which completes this analysis, is a rabbit with horns. A rabbit with horns is neither a bodhisattva or a bodhisattva vow holder. A rabbit with horns doesn't exist. So that's just what you would use as an example of something which is neither. So if the way you play this, it's not a game, it's how they analyze phenomenon. Detsuko Rinpoche, this is a translator's note. When you compare any 2 phenomena, you will find that they have 3 possibilities, 4 possibilities, they are mutually exclusive, meaning they contradict each other and never have any commonality, or they're synonymous, meaning if A is there, B is always there. If B is there, A is always there. So the way that you say if it's 3 permutations, it means that one or the other is always necessarily so, but the other isn't, for it to be 3. For it to be 4, it means there's cases where there's both. For instance, if there's something which is A but not B, and B but not A, that then becomes 4. If there's something that A is always B, but B is not always A, then it's 3. And that's kind of how you figure out which is which. You figure out the 2 subjects, if there's ever a case where they don't interact, and if it's the case that there is a case where they don't interact and they have a common locus, it's 4. If they interact, if there's a case where you'll have to figure it out by that. But that's how this analysis takes place. It's if it's 3, it means if it's A, it's necessarily B, but if it's B, it's not necessarily A. A and B have a common locus, and there's something which is neither A nor B. If it is 4, you find something which is A but not B, B but not A, but something that is both A and B, and something which is neither A nor B. If it is synonymous, it means if there's A, there's always B. If there's B, there's always A. And if it's mutually exclusive, it means if there's A, there's never B, and if there's B, there's never A. So I apologize for this, but there's a lot of people who, Rinpoche always teaches on this, 3 and 4, and if you sit back and just study that one part, A and B, what I'm talking about, and there's a lot of books about this that are out now, Debate in Tibetan Buddhism, and another great book, Course in Study and Debate by Purdue, I believe. It really explains this well by overlapping circles. And I think it's an important tool because this is how all phenomena is analyzed in these debate texts, and as Westerners, we need these tools. I apologize, and thank you. Selpulasho. Musumushi.
sentient tantric do sanji ju tuba xiao nyabe sanglu cheba chen wa de ji la teba chen bi shang ju sen se de是 marba
then yentu dan ranjiao sem je
yure
yure
sen ji ran je sang ji ne de shang ju ton na nyabe sen ji ran je shang ju ton na nyabe sen ji ne de shang ju ton na nyabe sen ji ne de ge jen le ma de yo ma ro ran je shang ju ton na nyabe sen ji de ran je de jen le ma de yo ma ro teba chen bi
So when we look at these various mind generations that take place, we have mind generation in the hearer vehicle. We have mind generation in the solitary realizer vehicle. But the Mahayana mind generation is specifically this mind generation that is, that's specific to the great vehicle. It's wishing to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So when one has this mind generation, but in the hearer vehicle, this will never lead to Buddhahood. It will only lead to the liberation of a hearer. And the mind generation that occurs in a solitary realizer's continuum is a mind that directs him or her to only the goal of the solitary realizer vehicle. So it is only the Mahayana mind generation that has this goal to become a Buddha for all sentient beings' sake. And this is the exclusive factor of this mind generation, because we have mind generations, and we have mind generation, for instance, at the path of accumulation or path of preparation, seeing, etc., in all of these vehicles. And the hearer vehicle has a path of accumulation. The solitary realizer does as well, and the bodhisattva does. But the bodhisattva one is the only pathways which will lead to Buddhahood, because the aim is for that. That's the reason for it. So this mind that wishes to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings is a result. So it's caused by something. So how does this mind occur? And when we look at, there are two practices, there are two lineages of practice which show one how to generate the spirit of enlightenment. The first lineage of practice was passed down from Master Atisha and is called the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that is realizing the spirit of enlightenment. And the second lineage is the lineage passed down from Master Shantideva, and it's called equalizing and exchanging self with others. So these are the two causal lineage practices which allow one to have the result occur, which is the spirit of enlightenment. Dison. In the first express, the Lord Atisha's 7-point cause and effect for realizing the spirit of enlightenment, we find 6 causes and 1 result. So the 6 causes are as follows: recognizing sentient beings are our mother, remembering their kindness, wishing to repay their kindness, love through the force of attraction, great compassion, and then extraordinary attitude. These are the 6 causes, and then the 7th, which is the effect or the result, is the spirit of enlightenment. And again, spirit of enlightenment is English for bodhicitta. So the most it's very important to initially understand the first of those steps, recognizing sentient beings are our mother. Without that, the next steps can't occur. It's not possible. So we have to really establish this first point, that all sentient beings are our mother, because from that platform, we are able to generate remembering their kindness, wishing to repay their kindness, love through the force of attraction, great compassion, extraordinary attitude, bodhicitta. So we're able to, from this platform alone, realize these other things. So it's necessary to establish this sentient beings being our mothers initially. Less so. Less so. Less so.
Pami shebat bugu shebat rega mares. Jusen karesana pama shen chen la bugu shen chen chaba yo mares. Pama shen mebala bugu shen mebi chaba muduas.
Less so.
Bugu sheba kono loga ni yo mares. 아만 보고도 아말 제바레데 보고 쉐바데 테 바두 쉐바는 용어레스
Less so.
바두 쉐바는 가는 용어 테 다말 용어 다만 토마메바레스
Okay.
세제지기 저월 토마메바 나진 세제 사망의 저월 토마메바레스 어떤 내손은 세제 나지랑 많이 버셔야를 라브레스.
So how do we arrive at this truth that our belief, and it's between the two somewhere, this understanding that all sentient beings are our mother? We do so by analysis. So we look at our own continuums, and we first have to answer the question, where did our consciousness, our continuum that we have right now, where did that come from? So we can come up with the first option that it came from our parents. So is it possible that our consciousness that we are experience right now is from our parents' consciousness? If that were the case, what our parents know and don't know would be what we know and don't know. So if it is something that is known by our parents, it would be something that is known by us. It is something that is not known by our parents, it would be something that would be not known by us. But we see very different continuums going on here because we don't have this same state of knowing in the child as the parents. What the parents know, the child doesn't automatically come out knowing. That consciousness is not of that same substance because it would know the same things if it were. It would, if it was of that same continuum, if our consciousness continuum was from our parents, passed from us to our parent, from our parents to us, there would be no difference in knowing. But we see there is a difference in knowing. So how do we say then our consciousness comes about? We would say it comes about from a previous moment's consciousness, and when we trace it back to the moment that we're born, and when we're born, we aren't born knowing what our parents know and not knowing what they don't know. So when we were born, where does that awareness come from? As Buddhists, we would say from a previous moment. And where would that be occurring? It would be occurring in the intermediate state. And the intermediate state would be caused by the previous life, which would be caused by the previous intermediate state. And then we would trace this back through logic and analysis and find no beginning. There's no possible way to establish a beginning. So this is how we establish one being's, our own's, beginningless consciousness. So then if our consciousness is beginningless through this establishment of recognizing that it can't be from our parents, because if it was, we'd know what they know, but it comes from something, it has to come from a like substance. At this moment came from a previous moment's consciousness, we trace it back to birth, and then we just can't find a beginning logically. There's no possible way to have this non-consciousness intervention. It has to be a continuum of some sort. And if if this is our analysis and we're one person, then everyone else must have the same situation of beginningless continuum going on. And so if I have this beginningless continuum that stands up to logic and reasoning, then if I apply the same exact logic and reasoning to someone else, then they have this same beginningless continuum. And once we start to believe and understand this through logic, then this idea that all sentient beings are our mothers becomes believable and truth as well. Because if they've had beginningless lives and we've had beginningless lives, then this becomes possible, probable, and then truth as we analyze it. Geshe Rinpoche.
What the reason Tamayina and see that my is the Luli Abchang.
So if we think in this way, then we will be able to arrive at a true awareness of this idea that all sentient beings are our mothers.
That my but she said my shape is the teen time of the things was Sunday mother Jiba mother and rubber words. Sunday mother rubber words. Sunday mother Susu Kadisha was Susu Korota.
So then the way that we maneuver then through the next stages of this 7-point cause and effect is then from this first basis. we recognize that all sentient beings are our mothers, and then we remember their kindness and we base it on the interaction experiences that we've had with our own mothers, and we see her kindness to us, and then once we can start to analyze that, then we recognize that everyone has done that for us at some point in time or another in previous lives. So we go through these stages of this recognizing sentient beings are our mothers, and then we wish to repay their kindness, and then from that we have, we recognize that all sentient beings are our mother, and then from that we remember their kindness. And from that memory of their kindness, we then wish to repay their kindness. And from that wish to repay their kindness, this love through the force of attraction takes place. And as a translator's note, it's attraction like magnet has to metal, meaning that being attracted to sentient beings because you care about them, not attraction in the way that you would normally think. So this love through the force of attraction, great compassion, this all occurs from these precepts, and then they build on one another. And then there's a realization eventually of bodhicitta. So if we, this is basically how one would go through these 7-point cause and effect according to Lord Atisha to generate the spirit of enlightenment. Less so.
다나 젠데 저완 담번이는 배도 공스宣주 로지 공고들요宣로 제바르바 다나 젠데 저완네 담번이는 배도 공스 담번이는 와다지 냐바지 냐지데 냐바지고는 생지도 공고레스.
Less so. So where we find then the next method for generating the mind that aspires to enlightenment is found in Shantideva's text, The Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, or Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Master Shantideva. And we find this idea of this equalizing and exchanging self with others by this exchange of taking on the suffering of others and giving all happiness, this giving and taking practice that's presented to abandon the self-cherishing attitude. And Rinpoche said, anyway, we'll leave it at that. I'll find you the exact quote that really presents it. I believe it's in chapter 8, but I don't want to get distracted in what I have to remember to translate looking through this. We'll just move on from there, but we find that Master Shantideva is where the points are made about this equalizing, exchanging self with others. So here, what would normally be an attitude which cherishes ourselves is then transformed to have the same degree of cherishing that we would for ourselves to cherishing others. So the exchange that takes place, it's equalizing and exchanging. So it's this first equalizing takes place and then an exchange. So this exchange is that exchanging our own self-cherishing and changing it into cherishing others. So that same force that we have of cherishing ourselves, we then put to cherishing others. So we see the negativities of cherishing ourselves and the benefits of cherishing others, and then this is how this practice works. Decent.
Rani Chiba Nibijin, Joa Tuma Maban, Tiba to Nasul Dogan to what the Telaten Yores. Joa Tuma Maban, Tatiba to Nasul, the one Hachi and She, and the Jen Chiba Nibijin Debores. They is also all the Ranches, the Jets, the Jaguar, you sent to Wores.
So what is the reason that we say that self-cherishing attitude is negative, and cherishing others is positive. When we look at all the negativities that we've had since beginningless time, all sufferings and negativities, we can trace them back to a self-cherishing attitude. And when we look to all the forms of happiness that we've ever experienced in all of our lives, we can trace those experiences back to an attitude which cherished others. So this is the reason that we say that self-cherishing attitude is negative and cherishing others is positive, is because all of the negativities that have ever occurred in our lives have been from cherishing ourselves, and all the positive things that have occurred in our lives have come from cherishing others. So that's the reason for this point.
라니 진진 고바 구주고 만나 진진 요된 구지 라마 쇼바 말베.
I know
라니
where that
제반지
is.
진진도 고바 줘레 동행 탄식 줘레스. 네 만나 진진 요된 구지 신 제반지 진진데 네 요된 탄식 도와 탄식 줘레스. 네 로존 란레 탄식 찔라다 kunla kadin shawa gons lojon nal te yodro la ren ta ji la das o de kyun ga lo ran jin del ten so
Banish the one to
res
blame.
ane yode ga lo de jin je ban jin del ten so res o tu ga ji ba yin sa da
The Rani Chepa Zimbi Chone Di Mido Dungyal JB.
o de lama chu ban
Okay.
den do de
Two che.
shuen ju no ga ji ba
Lesson.
de lojon
So we find all of the texts have very, very similar points made about this attitude of cherishing ourselves. In the Guru Puja, we find the quote that says, "This chronic disease of cherishing ourselves is the cause giving rise to our unsought suffering. Perceiving this, we seek your blessings to blame, begrudge, and destroy the monstrous demon of selfishness." So here it's pointed out in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, Shantideva points out to banish the enemy of the self-cherishing attitude, or one needs to get rid of the enemy of the self-cherishing attitude. And then in the 7-point cause and effect text by Geshe Chikawa, we find the point made, banish the one to blame for everything. And that, when we look to what it's being spoken of in this context, it's speaking of a selfishness, a self-cherishing attitude. So when we look through all of these various texts, we'll find that the common theme is that cherishing ourselves has been the cause of all pains, and cherishing others has been the cause of all forms of happiness. And all of these texts, here it is. Whatever joy there is in the world, all comes from desiring others to be happy. And what other suffering there is in the world, all comes from desiring myself to be happy. And that's from Shantideva's text. So we see this common theme that all negativity comes from cherishing ourselves and selfishness, and cherishing others creates all of the positive things we've ever experienced. Geshe Rinpoche. Lung Kanga Rasam.
아저 마시 여보다 저가 나만래 집 수도 그걸로 나막 되는 시들어 다 이슈 받다 힌두스가 하고 줘 있으라고 해줘
Leso.
하고 줘 있으라고 그래 안에 어디 체리벌 제우도 체리벌 개발지다 시라래 어디 체리벌에 남이 용의 시다 싶은 나지 체리벌 때는 체리벌 가려고 한다
So,
저 계시도 왔어
so we know that as Buddhists, this is what we believe. We believe that this is how our consciousness, this is how we are created. But this isn't shared by all religions. We find other religions with differing views. The Christian and Hindu tradition and others have a creator God theory, saying that there's an external God that's created all of this. And then there is the scientific community, and it'd be nice to ask them what they think, who or what they think creates this consciousness, creates this moment. And these are all very important, how do I say this? These are all very important categories or groups of people being asked these questions. and this question is very important. So he's saying that these are the other religions, ourselves, and the scientific community are very important bases to ask questions to, and this question is of the utmost importance to ask. What made this happen? Why are we here? This consciousness.
What the answer to the matter is somba the level. That can't shanchu send Julia, but the Zach of Yizan, till Doja is lost on what the debate of Satu, and Nabi the Marba. Go Yento, shanchu send no then Habala, Hobala, Tijela Yantabashuba Mabu, Nana, Sanjibata Demba, Nazwan. That Germachi what the Ralu, the Nijigores, Shanchu Samba Garso, Shanchu Samba Doja is here the other, and then Shanchu Saint Julie Chevan is on the Jagudos, Shanchu Saint Julie Chevan is on the Sanji Batule, and then Jujana, what the Debamago, the younger Nabichu Yungores, the Jana Abados, Germachi, Gonson Yamos, Gojento, Shanchu Samba Dodel Habala Habas. Shanchu Sembi Dombata Debasana, and the Mercen Jula Dembarova, Mercen Jude, Chili Jagurwa, Shanchu Sembi Domba Dembala, Hubala, Teba Chembala Yantaba, Shubar Sheba Mabunanas, Pachakashilo, and the Sonsa Mamudos.
Oh, okay, listen.
Hanas, that Jeremachi Ranlu Jena, Sanjebata Demba Nezondes, Shanchu Sanjeba Nezonde. The Sanji Bati Jagundos, Sanji Jematabatel Junjana, Nabichu the Yungere, then the Tolan Jolan, Tolan Malula, Samalo the Yungres, the Nejagundos, Germaji. Then but ne, Zongoba Gosan Yamos, Germaji. Shanju Saint Julia, but Nezon Jagundos on the
Solam Chungo.
Tolan Chungo, Haji Sabato.
Tuche. Okay.
Yeah.
So just going back to where we were in the text, we were going through number 3 in Jayan Sheba's, point number 3 in Jayan Sheba's commentary, and it is after number 2, which was basically saying that the commentaries aren't clear on this. So number 3 is, even though in other scriptural contexts there are many statements that those with the bodhisattva vows who are learning the trainings are the ones who have correctly entered the Mahayana, I think that here the object has to be understood as any bodhisattva, starting with those who have generated the aspirational spirit of enlightenment. So there are some scholars or schools, Lama Tsongkhapa is saying here, that believe that this particular point that's being made about this black dharma. So black, and Rinpoche explained this also before this point. So Lama Tsongkhapa is saying that speaking disparagingly at any bodhisattva is a black dharma. Black dharma is something that is non-virtuous. So why is it non-virtuous? Because it's been presented in scripture, and it's in the lineage of those things that give rise to suffering. So Lama Tsongkhapa is saying that there are those who say that this is referring specifically to those engaged bodhisattvas who have taken the bodhisattva vow only. And here Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, I think, so what this means here is that according to our school, where it says, I think, Lama Tsongkhapa being the head of this school, this is saying, according to our school, the object here is any bodhisattva. So any bodhisattva on any of the 5 paths, on the path of accumulation, on the path of preparation, on the path of seeing, on the path of meditation, on the path of no more learning, Buddhas, any of these bodhisattvas categorically fall under the object in this case, according to Lama Tsongkhapa. He's saying that at the smallest level, at the path of accumulation, where a bodhisattva becomes a bodhisattva and doesn't have a bodhisattva vow, at that moment he or she becomes the object that's being spoken of here. Digsa.
단 상주 생 줄이 흘러다네 가르치나 네 나비 추르는 거레스 달라 지시 쉐바네 망아버수 매버오사 상주 생 줄이 현들에 상주 생 줄이 비 소만 중원에 상지 봐도 안데 상지 준주 제송나 도자리 아부 말해서 라우소나 어디 나비 추르 디바 먹어레스 달라 지시 쉐바네 망아버수 매버오스 네 상주 생바 상주 생줄이 여봐 네 상주 생 여봐 총랑 총원에 좀데 사지 사바 참말래 준주 제바이나 야부 말에 도자르서 들러바이나 지시 제바네 망아버수 매버오스 준주바도데 들러그레스다 어들러는 나비 추르는데스 얘데 디바 먹어 임베스 론도 temba ganshi randi nami dunga jeji risene ba imbeje odledi marba.
Okay, so we're moving on to number 4. And number 4, what is done to these bodhisattvas is to speak disparagingly with blame, with libel, and so forth. So here, what is this black dharma that is being spoken of? It is speaking badly to a bodhisattva. Why is it non-virtuous? It's non-virtuous because it has been presented in scripture and it falls under the category of that which gives rise to suffering. So I believe the cut point is just this first, the jipa, mambo yomare, the tikchi,
There's Lord, there's
the ma kabaka.
다간데 달라지 쉐바네 망아수 해봐오 시다게 꾸네 하네 제바 그 제바네 레바도 튀노스 시당 꾸네 한데 근데 그 도자레서 자주 삼바다 상제도들 도자 라우나 제바 먹어야 되는데 그래서 콘도 꾸네 한데 라바주고 도스 어디 먹어야 되는
Okay, so 4 also. When I stop, 4 is over. So this all is in number 4. What is done to these bodhisattvas is to speak disparagingly, with blame, with libel, and so forth. The assertion that what is said has to be motivated by hateful words accords with the commentary. So here it's saying that it has to. Literally is angry path. Like there has to be an angry basis, like this. What they mean by this angry path, or it has to be almost permeated. When this thing is happening, when this thing's being said, it's in it. So that's why they call it an angry path. And no one translates it like that, but they translate it a lot of different ways. But that's really what it means. It means that this anger is saturated into these words. These words have them, are permeated by this anger, and that's what is meant by motivated by hatred. The assertion that what is said has to be motivated by hatred accords with the commentary. It means that those words have to have in them this anger for them to be as potent. It has to have this. Oh, we're taking a break. We'll be right back. Snack time. Tu Chenrezig Rinpoche, Yapaldu, Sheda Selvaldu. Magé, the Khensur the Hartford magazine. Pajasa.
Oh yeah.
Jipa.
다 제바 들어. 제바 상주 생주를 해봐들 간데지 라나 디바 나비추에 그래서나 달라 지지 쉐바네 망아버수 해보스 망아버 가르 매고르서나 시다기 꾸네 하네 저버 제바네 데바던 튀노스 콘드 꾸노란데 근데 제달 도자 로바주고 그래 상주 삼바 상주 생주를 해봐 도자 로소나 나비추에 그래서 what the Germany te song do one debata tuno. What about the Jabare?
Okay, so we're on page 77 again, third paragraph down. Fourth point, and the fourth point begins the assertion that what is said has hold on. What is done to these bodhisattvas is to speak disparagingly, with blame, with libel, and so forth. The assertion that what is said has to be motivated by hatred accords with the commentary. While when one is saying these words, the words have to be imbued with anger or hatred, according to the commentary. So they have to be motivated by these things. Okay?
Ngaba, you gone la.
Let's go. Let's go.
Heba, you gone la heba. Ngaba what the Shanju San Jula Yabala. And Maneba Heba, you gone la. Hebala. Shansen Chu Dando, Yawan now, Shansen Chu Dando Yawan now. Tijela Meba, Druban Deba, Dubil Shadow, Tadala Mebala, Debe Shejan, Tunguashi, Tungua, Shiki, Chubandaos, Tunguashi, Chubandaos, you gone la Mebas, you gone la Shanchu San Jula Yabe, Yubala, and Mayaba Gandas Mebala. Shansen la Chu Dundu Nyawan, Shansen la, Shanju Sen la, Chu Dundu Nyawan Nam. Tijin la Mebans, Druban Deba, Dubi Chedos, Tijin la Deba Yabaka Dubi Chedo, Tadala Mebala, Debe Shejan, Tungoashi, Chubandaos. Tangaba to Tanda to Delicious Tatana, you call them Hebala, Shansen, you call them Heba, the Shanju San Julia, you can't tell, and the Kushanju San Gaburo. Gabut the Mabazua Tandale, and the Heba, Delicious Sondos, what the Jagina, Debat Tumbudos. You call them Hebala, Shansen la, Chutan to Nyawan Nam, Teba Chimbala Maba. Meba, Tuban Debi, Deba Dubi Chedos, Tiba Chimbal Gabi, you can so the Meba Zuyak Cheto, and the Doja Loba Ina, and what the Casa, Nabi Shredos, Sheto, Tadala Mebala, and Debali Shedos, Debali Shejan, Tunqua Shiki, Chubandos, Tunqua Shiki. Oh, the Diban Rabandus, Germany.
It's Salo Mambo, the Kensa, the Dasi Mambo Dan. Kensa, okay. But even though the commentary says that the bodhisattvas to whom it is spoken are diligently seeking the teachings, and the words are spoken in order to stop their belief in or wish to practice the Mahayana, it seems to be enough if they understand the meaning of what is being said. So this is number 5.
This one.
Okay, Dixon.
Didn't
Ngay Sampa, the Kabak. Okay, good so, Dixon.
This one not that Truba Chigi Tuane. Truba Chigi Tuanes. Truba Chigi Tuane, Tela, Haba Maimbi, Dran. Haba Maimbi Drane, Nansu Namba, Chin Shi Shawa, Tabu Nyebi, Mi Masho Jobos, Nyebi Mi Masho Jobos, Truba de Telang Haba Maimbi Dranes, Tashanju Sen Jula Yenche de Le, and then Doja Lawur, Doja Marba, Haba Maimbi Drane. Nansu Namba Jen Sheshawa, Tabu Nyebi Tsi, Mashaba Jobos, Siburan Mabaji, Junju Jida Juro, the Tanjil Gogres, 콜 세브로 말아봐지는 콜 돈달로 콜 쩐주 되게 줘로 어떤 아버지 레스다 달랑 하바 많이 베다네 나중에 받게 셰샤와 따보 녀비 미마쇼스 쩐든도서 말아봐지 쩐든 노는도 전에 고아당대 아주로 어떤 질서 그래서다 녀비 미마쇼와 줘봐오 메녜베다네 담마 상바시에도서 메녜베다네 쿨로로 마보고 계셔버들라 그래스 마상바시에도 셰바다보 미지 신의 줘보고 미지 신의 줘줘다 저는 주는도 저는 대체 야본 말을 도자르스 어들라우나 세버질라버레스다 메녜베다네 마상바제도서 마상바제도서 네 마잠바 쇼군도세 당가서에다 거서야도 말봐. 마잠바 제도 셰샤와 타보 미지 신의 줘보고사. 어디 텐데 준주 제바든 미 신의 준주 발라 그래스. 마잠바 쇼도 송고서 말아봐지. 저 마잠바 쇼군도 돈도시 다마도 말봐. 달랑 하바 많이 비자네. 나중에 바진 셰샤와 타보 녀비 미 마셔와 줘보고스 마삼바 준도도지 동고서 말아보시 대동부트레스
Rinpoche, then Yune Yena? Megewa? The Chikshena, okay, then it.
당면에 있는다 마인다 다 간다 준주고로 다
The Nga Jun.
마삼바 줘도 동고서 라바이나 미신의 준주버드레스 마삼바 줘도 동고서 말아보시 동도진 시야주로 어디 미 마셔와셔야 돼 어디 달랑 하바 많이 비다네 나중에 받진 셰샤와 다보니 헤비 미 마셔왔어 노노진 줘봐 세부 말아봐 다 메녜비 드라네 마삼바 줘도 오시 안초로 마삼바 줘도 마스들 라우나 안 코세블 응어슬러로다 셰바 다보 미지 신내 줘봐오 줘봐 많이 봐네 나반다단데 마삼바 시 제바 따보 나바 신의 제바 단스 시지 마이방 하마 손지 타르자데 데발리제도스 다든 어디 조바들 만데시지 말바
Rinpoche, the Malana, the nature wa yure. The Malana, then the Ngatsu Rik, Kandre Samazu. Gangen Sena the Ngatsu Rik, the Lama Kashe, Ken Sabudu. Ngatsu Malana, then Konsu the Yapudu Tsanlodangudu. Then the Tsanlogar Yube. Gangen Sena the Nyune, Arila, the Lama Mambo, the Ducha Yen. Gangen Sena Konsu Mizanshu, then Kon the Nge, the Ngapa, the Getru Lagudu. Then the Getru, the Kon Mizansha, the Getru Jenda Lana, the Megewa Yen. The Ngetriwa. Gangen Sena the Chu Getru Kanga, the Salodang, Yene Lagamare. Gangen Arila, the Nutra Yure. The Lama Mambo, the Mizanshu, the Getru. Then the Getru Malana, then the Getru Jenda Hakogamare. Megewa Hakogamare. Then Kon Sampa the Gegen Sheda Yabudu. Then the Getru Moa. Gangen Sena the Getru Kashi Shegadu. Nge Lana the Megewa yen. Then the Nek Tonson de. Getru Tambo Getru Nga then Getru Ju. Then Getru Nga Tambo Shegadu. Nge the Lama Ducha Lana. Then nge Megewatsa. Then Getru Ja boom nang Tanda yure. Then Garishene, Gangen Sene the Getru Shegadu. So I'll explain what we're talking about in a minute. Okay, Diksung. So I'll read this, explain this, and then just to say what I was translating. Okay. The commentary says simply a bodhisattva. Okay, let me just get back to where we are. Hold on. Okay, the commentary explains that something disparaging is, for example, saying that he or she has, I'm going to read the whole thing. What is done to these bodhisattvas is to speak disparagingly, with blame, with libel, and so forth. The assertion that what is said has to be motivated by hatred accords with the commentary. Next. But even though the commentary says that the bodhisattvas to whom is spoken are diligently seeking the teachings, and the words are spoken in order to stop their belief, wish in the Mahayana, it seems to be enough if they are understood the meaning. Next, the commentary explains that something disparaging is example, saying that he or she has poor character, wherein you do not mention any specific fault. Blame is, for example, saying he is not celibate, wherein you are specific, and a liable is, for example, saying, in this or that he engaged in sex, making it more specific. The commentary attaches the term criticism to these three. So what Lama Tsongkhapa is doing is explaining what each of these terms means by way of an example. So the debate that just took place was, in the United States, there is at times fear driven by this, where teachers have engaged in misconduct and students are afraid to say something about it because they don't want to create this non-virtue, that they're criticizing a teacher. And if they don't say something about it, these groups of students can grow and grow and grow and grow and grow and grow to a point where there's a hugely devastating result at a mass level of suffering. Whereas if these one or two people, when there were 5 of them or 10 of them sitting there, said, this is wrong, this is what's really going on, they might have stopped an enormous amount of suffering. Rinpoche said this is all true, and these are different contexts, but we have to just look at what's specifically being spoken in the text here without cultural commentary. But I guess it was more of a question I was asking, what do we do in this case? It's not rampant. It's not something that's rampant, but it's something that has happened, and I was just curious how we dealt with that. So, Lapcha Irabe, the Khonso Kanga de Sanlodan du, then Ngatsu de Geche Shedu de Megewatsa Yene Gemma Getru Mambo Dugnel Chagare. Gangin Sena de Khonso Tepa Yire, then Tepa Chagare, Gangin Sena Khonso Anjergu de Gudu. It's important that students really look at the teacher. Each individual student checks the teacher. So this is how you know if they're good. You look at them very carefully. Is what they're doing with this good or not? Is what they're doing with this good or not? So Rinpoche is saying to check your teacher very carefully. But it shouldn't be an angry approach. This shouldn't be done with some anger. This should be done for the purposes of alleviating suffering, not to protest for protest's sake. So that's what Rinpoche is saying, not done angrily, meaning the motivation shouldn't be just, the motivation needs to be proper when you're doing it, is what it's saying.
Oh yeah, that number
7.
The Ranjala yang Jun Yus. That Junju that the Nasul de Yunga Lelhabashitaris, second one. Jumba Ranjala, Jun Nishin, Yabachius, Shanju Samba Le, the Junju Jaya to what there, Shanju Saint Julia by Yanchile, Junju Jaba to the Nasul Yunga Lelhabashitaris, and the Yamishitak Chibris. The Ranjala, Junya, Nyame Jan, Shindu Chede, Handu Jus in Batter, Tamal Tes Sonsa in Jerva, Dudu Jus in Las, Jean, Chancel and Hemby, Ne Saint Genam, Teneji, Geba, Chancel Ne Guba Dance. Shanchu Sambala Goan de Bamatu, Shanchu Sambala Goan de Bamatu, Radu Shewan Nabarngabi, Chuti Jundole Sonlas, 다 간다 와데 상주 선발 준주 전에 상주 선발이는 영화를 진대야 그 주도 와데 시다 내가 지주도 와데 상주 선발 있나야 상주 선발 준주 전에 와데 상주 선발 영화를 제야 주드레스 내라자라 존이니 상주 선발은 존이야 내나 아는 가서 들리 내가 요로다 존이 내미장 신도 체대 아 너도 죄신 봐 공도 때 송사인지로 죄신 라스 예야 샹셀라 녀비 센지나스 샹주 선발의 준주제네 그 센제도에 나야 대녀지 개바 샹센데 녀완네 구바다스 대녀지오데 녀완네 구비 레사가 샹주 선발 센제잖아요 아니 샹주 선발 준주제나 깨지 되냐 그 개바 어디냐와 내비 레사 그래스 개바 샹센테 냐와네 구바다스 샹주 선발 있는 배우도 샹주 선배 준주 제소나 개바 냐와네 구비 레사 그래스다 냐와네 구바다스 안 가술 계셔요 말보다 네 구바다 샹주 선발라 고바다 보마도 상주 선발을 고바다 보마도 par लेजे कागे 장 상주 선발 난도 또 문에 봤어 네 레 कागे 장네 상주 선발을 고바다 보마도 레 कागे 장네 상주 선발 녀월 제토 마레스 कागे 장 상주 선발 난도 또 문에 봐 라도 샤와 나바라 네비 추르진들 송라스 라도 샤나바게 추르진들 송도스 샹주 선발 있나요? 샹주 선발 존재지나 깨지 되냐 그 개발 내고비 개발 영화를 내고비 레사 그래스 샹주 선발 내손 통하게 주도 샹주 선발라 존재지비 마도제 데바가데지나 샹주 선발 영화를 통토고 말레스 어떤 정도와
Long Dumba?
아 dumba인데 라자라 종야네 녀미장 신도 제대 한도도 죄심받다르 공도는 샤주 선발 조조제나 다만 몸으로 좋아 죄신라스 제야 샤주 선발라 샤주 제셀라 제야 샤셀라 녀비스 제야 샤셀라 녀비 세제나 샹주 선발 해봐이나 세제도에나 팬도 말고 개바되냐지 녀완네 빌레사 그래스 녀완네 고바다스 샹주 선발라 고바다바 마도 안에 레강이 샹주 선발 녀완 통도 말레스 샹주 선발라 고바다소나 녀완 통하고 주데레스 마도바 ले गांगे जां शाजू सबा ngando तो मने बा सोसों दोसना रातो शेवा नाबा ने भी छुटे जिंदो ले सों दोस आजे जरो वो तो दुबादरे
Then the Long Yomaribe, the Jetong Long,
जेदों लों जरो दे ना शे बता
Dumba or Jepa?
जेदों 데르라도 라자라 조야 녀메제 신도 체데 한도디 죄sem 바타르 한도디 죄sem 바타 제동 제동
The Jetong.
죄sem 라스 제야 샹셀라 녀비 세제나스 샹주 선발 존재제는 세제바 이나야 개바되니지 녀완네비 레사 그래스
Leso.
샹주 선발의 녀완 동아 줘도 어디에 마도 제가 디바가데 제는 녀완 동토 말레스 샹주 선발 고바타바 마도 바 레강게 장 샹주 선발 간도 돈 메뉴 바 라도 샤와 나버네비 추르진돌 송라스 와도바 누바레도
Song La Dumba. Then Jepa, Jetong Long? Gangusena the da. The jepa?
Jeba duba resha, duba. Duba da jedung nolu yena duba.
Dunba? 7?
Jeba re jeba.
8.
Duba dere danda dere.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. I'm just, again, the categories. We're number 7. I have already discussed briefly the danger of this great offense arising in us. Indeed, if bodhisattvas have even a displeasing thought toward other bodhisattvas, they have to stay in hell for as many eons as moments of that thought's duration. And the thought on the magical of final peace says that no other action apart from slandering another bodhisattva can make a bodhisattva fall into the miserable realms. So imagine if a bodhisattva has to endure that kind of suffering for slandering another bodhisattva, what someone like us would have to endure. So that's the point that's being made here, is it's saying that bodhisattvas fall to the miserable realms due to these words. Imagine what would happen to us. So that's 7. And number 8 is going to be start that 8,000 verse quote.
Wata jeba duba le sayatre. Shanju semba le junju jena. Sanju gubun jubu toba ina tuma toba che tane bishi janu. Keba mo janu. Sanju gubun tuma toba chana gres. Duba le jans. Duba le jan. Longtemps matu. Shanju semba kanji kis. Longtemps matu shanju semba kanji ke. Longtemps tola. Sentu tsoba tsonshe na. Tawa junden senji keji jenye ba. Tenye keba jine kosha gogo so. She tetabi kontri samba tetan jeba tetan je keba jine ne lan dogo ba sonde. Shanchu le rindu Shanchu le shindu rinwan juros, watabatu jeba. Taka Shanchu senpa la junju jesu na, sanji kubun tuya la keba chi ma tu gugu me na, keba momo pa janu kres, sanji kubun tu ma tu pa, janu kres. Duba le jan, longtemps matu be, Shanchu senbes,
They gadu. They longten. They gadu. The Sanjay, the Cheran, Sanyi, Shanchuk, the Jagare. They gadu. Gomlam?
No, taba
Gomlam pa?
Solan taba ni yense taba ni yense de.
Kabar. Solam.
Solan jolan ne peche yendo. Jolan ne. An tenen chön tösen de jil sanje gres. Sanje longten ya yoro.
Lesa.
Longten matu be Shanchu semba so longten tu be Shanchu semba. Sembal junju jena. Ano kono keba jil sanje ya yena keba ja sanje matu baba janu gres. What does it marba?
Tu chena.
Duba le jan longten matu Shanchu semba kange tu bejan kasado.
The prediction. The Injike prediction. The Sanjay, the Cheran, the Dunta Ni Gemma, the Shanchuk Jagore. Dunta Sum, the prediction.
What the longten said ro.
Longten. The Ngay Sampa, the Obama president, the prediction.
Yeah.
You don't want to use any words that might stir up in here, so. Okay, so let me read this. Maybe I didn't. The verse summary, so this is 8. The verse summary of the perfection of wisdom in 8,000 lines says, if bodhisattvas who have not received a prediction of their enlightenment have an angry dispute with bodhisattvas who have received a prediction, they must put on armor of practice again for as many eons as moments of their coarse, faulty attitude. Then the Shanchu Semba prediction Yuna. Shanchu Semba prediction Mena Zinjana. The pig.
Da longtemps matu Shanchu semba de longtemps tu Shanchu semba le junju jena.
Lesa.
네 개바지를 상지케이나
Less.
개바지를 상지면도
1 year.
개바자단에 잡아장도레스
I
이제는
see.
라라 하고지 그래스
Okay, so the point of this is if a bodhisattva, so this prediction, this is what we're talking about, and Rinpoche was asking in English what they translated it as, because it's not common. It's in the 8,000, just as a translator's note, it's from the 8,000 verse Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, which is written in code almost. So that's the reason for the questioning of it. So if bodhisattvas who have not received a prediction of their enlightenment have an angry dispute with bodhisattvas who have received a prediction. So what this means is there are bodhisattvas who have been told by the Buddha at certain stage. We were trying to figure out the path of preparation, not really exactly sure. But there's some stage where the Buddha says, on this day and this month, you will become enlightened. So there are bodhisattvas of that type, and then there are bodhisattvas who haven't reached whenever that happens. So it's saying that if a bodhisattva who isn't there yet gets angry, has a fight or a dispute about who he is, then if they were going to be enlightened in an eon, for instance, before that fight, now they would have to add as many eons as moments of their coarse faulty attitude occurred. So every moment that they had this angry, bad attitude towards this bodhisattva who has had a prediction equals a year equals an eon added on to their eventual enlightenment. So when a bodhisattva gets bodhicitta, he or she isn't looking at becoming a Buddha very shortly. We're talking about eons before he or she actually becomes a Buddha, after that initial generation of the mind that aspires, the spirit of enlightenment. So when a bodhisattva becomes a bodhisattva, they still have eons of lives, of years or lives, however you want to translate it, before they become Buddhas. So it's and even though it's to us, as a note, very high realization, it's the beginning for others as far as stages go. It's where one actually becomes a Mahayanist. When one becomes a bodhisattva, they become a Mahayanist. You aren't a Mahayanist if you're not a bodhisattva. You can be practicing it, trying to become one, but the line of demarcation is bodhicitta. So it's saying here that they'll have to basically do that many years in time for the moments of their attitude that were faulty. So if they had 100 faulty moments while they were in this argument, then they have 100 eons of extra lifetimes it will take to become enlightened. So it's the gravity is what this is trying to show. The gravity of, the object. When you yell at someone, that the more potent the object, the more negative the consequence, basically, of the action. It's called power of basis, as a translator's note.
kontu naba tangche to gaba tang, shuna, tamata shaba tang, domba lambe kudes.
Gosh.
Kontu what the t-shirt satro.
Okay.
Chula no kuzo la tro de tengurde. T-shirt tage de shuguro. T-shirt kontu naba tangche to gaba tang, shuna, tamata shaba tang, shadan jegures, shabata domba la, be gude, tenile duba teni jiro, duba tenile saint de zan, minyan, tamba cheshejin, soso chabar shejin, shejan, donshe la, ne, ga maje tene, sanji, chunder lo, Jesus, what about the Guadre?
Golpa. Okay, so now we're moving on to number 8. Thus it says that they must travel along the path, starting over again, for eons commensurate with the angry attitude. They become very far distant from their enlightenment. For this reason, stop your anger on all occasions. If it arises, immediately confess it. I think that the Jepa Rinpoche, Kabart Sash, the giant Sheba, Jepa.
Jepa College, Duba Le Chan, longtemps, Shanchu Samba, Kaji ki Lonten Tula Country Toba Tonshe Nas
Lesso.
Lonten Matubi Shanju Samba Lonten Toba Junju Jesuna Segurota
Did Lhasa.
Doja Losuna
Lesso.
Tonshe Na Tawa Junden Senji Keji Jinjis
Lesso.
Country Lambi Keji Denji Ne Keba Jine Keba Chile Sanji in Keba Jaba to Vajan Gres
Tuche.
Then Keba Jine Gocha Gogo Sauce She Tabi Country Samba Tanji
Okay.
Samba Jatanji Cheba Tatanji Keba Jine Lauguba Sonde Shanju Sen La Shindo Rewan Juros, or that Shanju Sen Julia Tarim Chanores, what about
Jepa.
Jeba Jeba?
Tuchena. Okay, so I'm just ever clarifying these outlines. So number 8 also includes the slight commentary below the quote. So it also 8 includes the quote plus. Thus it says that they must travel along the path, starting over again, for eons commensurate with their angry attitude. They become a very far distant from their enlightenment. Period. That's where 8 ends. 9 begins, for this reason, stop your anger on all occasions, and if it arises, immediately confess it and strive to restrain yourself. That same text states, develop mindfulness, thinking. This state of mind is not constructive. Confess each instance, and restrain yourself from doing it again. Do not rejoice in it. Train in the teaching of the Buddha. So here, this is number 9, where the confession, the acknowledgement of the downfall, is presented. So sorry, I didn't. As I was reading it, I realized that had to be contained in there. So that's why I stopped and asked Rinpoche. So those two, I think it's one sentence, is in number 8.
단도선 뭐 컨트롤 예민이 되고 컨트롤 말이야. 상주 선발로 컨트롤 나서나. 네. 개바 동도 사바이 인다 대시 줄어서 레저가 간이 봐. 당진 좀만 줄어서 쉬어줘 말이야. 개바 상주 선발로 전주 전나 개바 동도 사바 그 사람 정도 그래서 개바 동도 사바.
Kelpa Dun, 1000.
인다 대시 줄어서 개바 동도 사바 인다 대시 줄어서 컨트롤 지kin 정보시 쉬어줘로. 오만 요발에 강시 제신을 트바이 인다 퇴장 개바자 사바 개지긴 좀 대시르스. 오만 요발에 상주 선발을 트나 개바자 사바 그 사람 정도 그래서 언제 말아도와 안에 오만 요발에 어디 자송은 쉬어줄 동송도 어떻게 가르쳐서나 상주 선발 마인베 상주 선발을 전주 제송나 개바 동도 사바 그 사람 정도 그래서 상주 선발 마인베 상주 선발을 전주 제나 컨트롤하나 개바 동도 사바 그 사람 정도 그래서 개바 동도 사바이 인다 대시 줄어서 컨트롤 지kin 정보시에스 오만 요발에 강시 제세나라 트바이 인다 퇴장 개바자 사바 개지kin 좀 상선 솔람베 상선 졸람발 트소나 개바 자사베 그타든 정도 그래서 어디 오만 버쳐들로 송요하래.
So we see it presented in various texts, the negativities of anger. So we find various quotes in Shanti Deva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. We find point being made in Chandrakirti's Madhyamika Avatara. We find points being made. And it says that in the Bodhichara Avatara, that if one becomes angry with a bodhisattva, then that moment of anger causes 1,000 eons of suffering. Now, in the Madhyamika Avatara, there's a slightly different sentiment where it says that it says that a moment of anger destroys 100 eons. So what's the difference being made here? Why does it have these different numbers of years or eons of suffering? that will occur if one becomes angry. And the reason is that the Bodhicharya Avatara is speaking to the Bodhisattva, a non-Bodhisattva having anger at a Bodhisattva. And the Chandrakirti text is speaking where it says 100 eons of a Bodhisattva who is angry at another Bodhisattva. So this is the difference that's being made here. So in Shantideva's text, it says Shunju Dun. Guide the Bodhisattva's way of life is 1,000 eons, and the Chandrakirti text says 100. And that's the difference. It's speaking to the basis of the agent and the object, rather. That's why meditation on patience is so important. Because it's said that by meditating on patience, then this will cause us to have beauty. Patience causes beauty. And by practicing patience, this causes us to be liked. When we have patience, the lords of the worlds enjoy it or like it. Oh, okay. So it's also stated that if you have patience, then it doesn't matter if we're talking about it in terms of Buddhist or non-Buddhist, the various levels of the tenet systems, whether they're the Vibhashika Great Exposition School, Sautrantika Sutra School, Chittamantra Mind-Only School, or Madhyamaka Middle Way School. It says that by being patient, one's intelligence will be increased. And it's speaking in terms of whatever you're trying to be intelligent about, basically. Decent. Shihula. Okay, so when you die, it said you will be born into the realms of the gods and the humans. And you purify your misdeeds. Because you purify your misdeeds. So we find many expressions where the downfalls or the negativities of anger are presented and the benefits of patience are presented. And we find this presented in many different cases. Dikso. Okay.
Sela Tada Nidun Jorosa. Madinju Kondu never mena, and Shamba the Niju Kondu Pungores, Penugres. Sela Tada Nidun Joro Shedan. Kanshir Retun Hamayi Saben Len Piwajen. Sawalasu Lotada. Komba Jona Kana Ne. And Shesong Sos.
So,
Judan Yujin La Nyeyu Xueji Tabi Samba Mayibala. What about the Lord the Thunder that you town it?
so. Okay.
That's one but then the Jiba de la Sonro, then the Leon. That is it.
Okay, so number 10, if you give hatred a chance, the love and compassion you have developed will weaken, and it will be hard to develop any new love and compassion if you practice for a long time. Thus, you cut the root of the spirit of enlightenment. If you stop hatred, the unfavorable condition for love and compassion, and cultivate love and compassion according to the previous explanation, then they progressively increase and eventually become limitless. Dharmakirti's commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition states, if unharmed by that with which is incompatible, love naturally comes into mind. And also, as you familiarize yourself with the attitudes of compassion and the like, which increase from the seeds of prior similar experiences, how could these attitudes remain the same? So here this speaks of the over and over meditation, familiarizing oneself with these ideas of love and compassion, and that the realizations come from the prior seeds planted of familiarization. So Rinpoche said we'll end there. And the quote from the Shanti Deva's text states, whatever wholesome deeds, such as venerating the Buddhas and generosity, that have been amassed over 1,000 eons, will all be destroyed in one moment of anger. So that's the 1,000, speaking to a non-bodhisattva. And I'm sure before the end I'll find the other one in the other text. So the so here it's speaking, when we go back to the text, it's, sorry, I moved in my mind. It says that in the commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition, it talks about these things arising from like things. So that more compassion arises from compassion, love arises from love. So it says, and you familiarize yourself with the attitudes and compassion and the like, which increase from the seeds of prior similar experiences. How could these attitudes remain the same? So these similar experiences, and here up top it says, if unharmed by that which is incompatible. So compatibility is what is being talked about here, that the compatibility is what creates these things. Love is created by that which is compatible with love, which is love. So that's how you start to understand how these things change. It says, how could these attitudes remain the same? The seeds from prior similar experiences grow upon each other. If there's this increase happening, how could it stay the same if there's this growth? So that's the point that's being made in number 10, and we will move on now to the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. So if everybody wants to turn to the prayer book, and we'll find the concluding prayers. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well, with whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times. I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandak, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Tuji Rinpoche, Gutsi Shapi Denrolam. And I'd like to say, I just want to thank Rinpoche because for 20 years I've been able to experience that analysis of the teacher and looking and checking, and all I've ever found is a holy being that follows the things that are in these books. And I just want to say the thank you to Rinpoche. Rinpoche nga de se du tu chena le nge lo ni shu cheran dagi dagi che son then cheran yune yen tu chena cheran yune yen gegen yune yen.